Dean Martin had 3 wives, but only one watched him die slowly. Night after night, John Martin sat at a nearby table in the same restaurant. She watched her ex-husband eat alone. She'd been with him through his affairs, his drinking, and something worse. A tragedy so devastating that Frank Sinatra said it killed Dean Martin years before his actual death. What happened in 1987 changed everything. And Jean never stopped watching over the man she couldn't save. Dean Martin's story began in the rough streets of Steubenville, Ohio. He was born Dino Paul Crociati on June 7, 1917. His parents were Italian immigrants. His father, Gano, had arrived from Montesilvano in 1913 and worked as a barber. His mother, Angela, was born in Ohio, but her parents came from northern Italy. At home, Dino only heard Italian. He didn't speak a word of English until he was 5. His early world was filled with Italian songs, rich food smells, and the struggles of a working-class family during the Great Depression. This strong Italian background would one day add charm to his music and style. But as a boy, it made life harder. When Dino started school, he faced cruelty. At Grand Elementary, other kids mocked his broken English and his Italian accent. They teased him, copied his words, and sometimes even threatened him. In those days, many looked down on immigrants. Dino fell out of place and hurt, but he didn't fight back. Instead, he learned to use humor and charm to protect himself. These traits would later help him win over audiences. That painful start helped shape the cool, confident Dean Martin the world came to love. By the time he reached his teens, Dino grew tired of school. He dropped out in the 10th grade, convinced that he was smarter than his teachers. The strict lessons didn't interest him. The real world seemed more exciting, and his family needed the money. He took dangerous jobs, working in steel mills where accidents were common. He also got involved in bootlegging and gambling, dealing cards, and running liquor during and after Prohibition. At just 16, he was part of Steubenville's risky underworld. These jobs were dangerous, but they taught him about people, survival, and how to stay cool under pressure. Dino even tried boxing, calling himself Kid Crochet. He fought 12 times as a welterweight, and joked later that he won all but 11. His time in the ring left scars, a broken nose, a cut lip, and broken knuckles because he couldn't afford hand wraps. Years later, comedian Lou Costello paid for him to get his nose fixed. The surgery helped him look the part of a leading man, even if the change was subtle. As he chased his dreams, Dino shared a tiny apartment in New York with his friend Sonny King. They were so broke, they staged bare-knuckle fights in their living room. Spectators paid $5 each to watch them beat each other until one passed out. On good nights, they made about $50, which would be worth nearly $1,000 today. They even pulled tricks at diners, pretending to get phone calls so the other could finish the food. When the owner caught on, he let them both eat for a nickel. Years later, when they made it big, they paid him back $25,000 each. Dean also worked as a croupier in a hidden casino behind a tobacco shop. By night, he spun roulette wheels and watched for police raids. Later at night, he sang in clubs under the name Dino Martini, inspired by opera singer Nino Martini. But his manager, Sammy Watkins, suggested he change his name to Dean Martin. It sounded less Italian, which helped him break into show business at a time when ethnic names could hold you back. That change opened doors. Dean's big break came with the Ernie Mackay Orchestra. There he found his voice. Inspired by Harry Mills and Perry Como, he developed a smooth, easy style that would make him famous. At first, he copied their sound, but soon he made it his own. His warm, relaxed way of singing won hearts and set him apart. It all started in Atlantic City in 1946. Dean Martin was singing at the 500 Club. Jerry Lewis was doing his wild comedy act. They were booked one after the other. But one night, their solo acts fell flat. The owner was ready to fire them. Out of desperation, they tried something new. They jumped on stage together. Martin sang while Lewis interrupted with wild antics. Martin answered with cool, straight-faced humor. The crowd went wild. Laughter filled the club. The owner rebooked them right away. What began as a last-ditch effort turned into comedy. Gold. Their chemistry was instant. Martin's smooth charm matched perfectly with Lewis's mad energy. Within weeks, their act became the hottest thing on the East Coast. People couldn't get enough. They changed nightclub comedy forever, mixing music, slapstick, and fast improvisation like no one had done before. In 1948, Hollywood came calling. Martin and Lewis signed a deal with Hal B. Wallis. Wallis was famous for producing Casablanca. The deal was small in money, just $75,000 for both of them. But what mattered was the freedom. Wallis gave them full control over their routines. This was rare. Studios usually kept stars on a tight leash, but Martin and Lewis could write and improvise as they pleased. Many thought this was a risky move. After all, they were still new to film. But it worked. Their movies had the same wild, unpredictable spark as their stage shows. The small paycheck didn't matter. They gained what few stars had in those days: creative power and the chance to shape their own legacy. Between 1949 and 1956, Martin and Lewis made 16 films together. They started with My Friend Irma and ended with Hollywood or Bust. That's more than 2 films a year. Their movies were huge hits. By the early 1950s, they were among the top 10 box office stars in America. In 1952, they were number 1. They outsold big names like John Wayne and Bing Crosby. People of all ages loved them. Their films mixed music, slapstick, and quick banter. They also conquered radio and television. They packed theaters coast to coast. Comedy teams and buddy films that came later owe a lot to Martin and Lewis. Their run remains one of Hollywood's most successful, but behind the scenes, things were falling apart. Martin felt like he was being pushed aside. The world seemed to see Jerry Lewis as the real star. In 1954, Look magazine put Lewis alone on the cover. They cropped Martin out. For Martin, this was a slap in the face. He was more than just a straight man. He was a star, too, but now it felt like nobody noticed. That cover was the breaking point. The tensions that had been building boiled over. Martin felt invisible. The gap between them grew wider. The friendship that once made their act special began to crack. By 1956, it all came to a bitter end. During the making of Hollywood or Bust, they had one final blow-up. Martin, tired and angry, told Lewis he was nothing more than a dollar sign. That one line said it all. Martin felt used. He felt like their partnership had become about money, not art or friendship. When they split, they didn't speak for 20 years. Fans were shocked. The team that defined comedy had fallen apart. The regret stayed with both men for decades. Their story became a lesson in how fame and success can tear people apart. The words, nothing more than a dollar sign, became a symbol of how show business can betray even the closest partners. Dean Martin's solo career got off to a rocky start. In 1957, he starred in 10,000 Bedrooms, his first film without Jerry Lewis. It was supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter. Instead, it nearly ended his career. The film had a budget of $1,999,000. It brought in just $1,190,500 at the box office. That meant a loss of almost $1.2 million. A huge blow at the time. Critics were harsh. They said the plot was shallow and Martin's performance felt awkward. People in Hollywood whispered that Martin couldn't make it on his own. The failure hit him hard. MGM insiders and reporters began to count him out, but Martin wasn't ready to give up. In 1958, he made a bold move. He took a massive pay cut to act in The Young Lions. Instead of the $250,000 he earned for 10,000 Bedrooms, he agreed to just $20,000. That role was supposed to go to Tony Randall. The studio didn't want Martin, but his manager called with the offer, and Martin said he would have done it for free. Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift backed him. They refused to start shooting without Martin. His performance in the film changed everything. He proved he could stand shoulder to shoulder with two of Hollywood's finest actors. That gamble saved his film career and showed his depth as a performer. Music had always been part of Martin's magic. In 1953, he hit big with That's Amore, a song that reached number 2 in the U.S. and became a classic. In 1955, Memories Are Made of This went all the way to #1, selling over 1 million copies. But the real surprise came in 1964. At the height of Beatlemania, Martin's Everybody Loves Somebody knocked A Hard Day's Night off the top of the charts. He became the only traditional pop singer that year to break the Beatles' grip on America's music scene. The song became his signature, and its words are carved on his gravestone today. Martin's acting breakthrough came with Rio Bravo in 1959. Cast as Dude, an alcoholic deputy, he shared the screen with John Wayne. Critics had doubted Martin could handle such a serious role, but he stunned them all. His portrayal of the man fighting his demons felt real and raw. The film made over $10.5 million and was the top-grossing Western that year. On and off-screen, Martin and Wayne built a friendship that added to the film's power. This role erased the idea that Martin was just a comic psychic or singer. When Dean Martin joined forces with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, it wasn't just another act coming together. It was the birth of something bigger. They became known as the Rat Pack, and they changed American entertainment forever. This wasn't just a group of performers. It was a family that brought swagger, humor, and a whole new kind of cool to the stage. They didn't just perform, they lived it. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, especially under Sinatra's leadership, their bond became legendary. Together, they filled the Sands Hotel with laughter, music, and unforgettable nights. Their wild parties, razor-sharp jokes, and charm turned Las Vegas into the playground of dreams. Even today, people remember that time as the golden age of Vegas. One of their most famous adventures happened in 1960 when they filmed Ocean's 11. Picture this. They'd shoot the movie in Las Vegas casinos between 1 light, 5 light a.m. when the city was quiet. Then they'd head straight to the Sands to perform sold-out shows at night. The movie was filmed at places like the Sands, Flamingo, and Riviera. Lines didn't matter much. They used cue cards and kept the energy flowing. The premiere was a major event on August 3rd, 1960. The mix of work, play, and pure fun set a new standard. They weren't just actors or singers. They were legends living out the story as they went. Part of their magic was in how they talked. Death became the big casino. Regular folks were Clyde. And anywhere other than Vegas, that was Dolesville, Ohio. Their slang kept outsiders guessing and showed just how tight their circle was. Even what they called themselves could change. The press liked Rat Pack, but Sinatra called it the Summit. It wasn't just a name. It was a sign of power, style, and friendship. Their fame didn't stop at show business. Thanks to Peter Lawford, who was married to Patricia Kennedy, they found themselves close to President John F. Kennedy. They sang the national anthem at the 1960 Democratic Convention, and Sinatra's High Hopes became a campaign song. For a short time, the Jack Pack helped Kennedy win over America. But politics has its own rules. By 1962, Robert Kennedy warned JFK to cut ties, afraid of Sinatra's connections to the mob. That ended their political chapter. But for a while, they were right at the heart of power. Behind the glamour, the FBI kept a close watch. The Rat Pack performed in casinos linked to the mob, like the Sands and Sahara. Sinatra's friendships with men like Sam John Anna didn't help. Wiretaps, files, and investigations followed them. Vegas was full of money, crime, and showbiz. And the Rat Pack stood right at the center of it all. They were part of what made that world both magical and dangerous. Then came television. In 1965, NBC asked Dean Martin to do a variety show. Martin tried to say no by asking for impossible things. He wanted to work just 1 day a week, skip rehearsals, and get paid a huge sum. To his surprise, NBC agreed. And so, the Dean Martin Show was born. Martin kept things easy. He worked just a few hours each week, read from cue cards, and didn't worry about mistakes. What viewers saw was what happened. That charm and effortlessness made the show a hit for 264 episodes. NBC even signed a $34 million deal to keep it going. Martin became the king of cool on Thursday nights. His drinking image was all part of the act. On stage, he looked like the fun-loving, tipsy playboy. But the glass often held apple juice, not whiskey. His children confirmed it. Even Sinatra joked that he spilled more than Martin drank. Off stage, Martin enjoyed quiet nights at home. The drunk act was just that, an act that made guests and audiences feel relaxed. One of the show's highlights was Martin's entrance. Every week he'd slide down a fireman's pole, cigarette in hand, looking like nothing could bother him. It was a perfect start to an hour of fun where anything could happen. After the variety show ended in 1974, Martin's roast took over. From 1974 to 1984, the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast became must-see TV. Big stars came to joke with and about each other. Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra, Lucille Ball, and many more. Martin, always in a tux with his glass of whiskey, led the fun, reading from cue cards, making everyone laugh, and proving that his style of cool never went out of fashion. Dean Martin's first marriage began in 1941 when he wed Elizabeth and Betty McDonald. His career was just taking off. And together they had 4 children, Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Deanna. But behind closed doors, life was anything but happy. Betty struggled with severe alcoholism. She often disappeared for long periods, leaving emotional wreckage behind. At the same time, Martin's affairs were no secret. As his fame rose, so did the number of women he was seen with at clubs and parties. The marriage became a sad cycle. Some believed Betty drank more because of Martin's cheating. Others said Martin cheated because of Betty's drinking. By 1949, they couldn't go on. Martin got full custody of the kids, and Betty slipped quietly out of spotlight. She lived out her days in San Francisco and died in 1989. The public never saw this pain. All they saw was Martin's easy charm. Not long after, Martin married again. Just weeks after his divorce, on September 1st, 1949, he married Jean Beggar. The wedding was big and glamorous. Jerry Lewis was his best man. For 24 years, they stayed together. Jean raised not only their 3 children, but also Martin's kids from his first marriage. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect family. But Martin's cheating didn't stop. The gossip columns loved to report on his affairs. The pressure of his fame and busy career made things harder. In the 1960s, after splitting with Jerry Lewis, Martin's solo career exploded. But the temptations grew, too. By December 1969, the marriage had cracked. They divorced in 1973. John never remarried. When their son Dean Paul died in 1987, John stayed by Martin's side. Even after the end of their marriage, they remained close. Jerry Lewis once wrote in his 2005 book that John was the best thing next to me that ever happened to Dean. He saw what many didn't. John's patience, her loyalty, her ability to forgive Martin's mistakes. That quote showed how deep the connections were in Martin's world. The friendships, the heartbreak, and the loyalty that lasted beyond the public image. Martin tried marriage one more time. On April 25, 1973, he married Catherine Horn. The wedding was grand, costing up to $100,000 at the time. There were French lilacs and 22 cages of white doves. Catherine had worked as a hair salon receptionist in Beverly Hills. Suddenly, she was part of Hollywood royalty. Martin adopted her daughter, Sasha. Sasha acted for a while in soap operas and films. She became part of the Martin family, but this marriage didn't last. By 1976, it was over. Biographers suggest Martin's heart was still with Jean. Others say blending the families wasn't easy. Catherine stayed out of the spotlight after the divorce. She was last seen at Martin's funeral in 1995. Behind all the charm and the cool image, Martin carried heavy burdens. His drinking, once part of his act, became real. As the years went on, it grew worse. Friends saw how it hurt his health, his work, and his relationships. Depression followed him everywhere. He hid it with jokes and easy smiles, but the pain was always there. On March 21st, 1987, tragedy struck the Martin family in a way that would change them forever. Dean Paul Martin, the eldest son of the famous entertainer Dean Martin, was only 35 years old when his life ended during a military training flight. That day, Dean Paul was piloting an F-4C Phantom II jet for the California Air National Guard. The mission seemed routine at first. He and two other jets took off from March Air Force Base in Riverside County, California. But the weather turned deadly. A heavy snowstorm hit the San Bernardino Mountains, covering everything in thick clouds and blinding snow. The jets had to rely on radar because they couldn't see anything in front of them. Air traffic controllers knew the danger. They tried hard to guide the jets away from the mountains, but with bad radio signals and busy airspace, they couldn't act fast enough. Dean Paul's jet smashed into a mountain at about 400 miles per hour. The crash killed him and his weapons officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz, instantly. The plane was almost completely destroyed. For 6 long days, search teams battled the harsh conditions to find the wreckage. When they finally located the site, they recovered the remains of both men and airlifted them out. The disaster shocked not just the military, but the entire nation. And for Dean Martin, it broke his heart beyond repair. Dean Martin had always called Dean Paul his golden boy. That wasn't just a nickname. It showed how proud and deeply connected he felt to his son. They weren't just father and son. They were close friends. The day Dean Paul died was the day something inside Dean Martin died, too. His friend saw the change right away. Rich Little, who knew him well, later said, once he lost a son, that was the end of him. Martin's daughter, Dina, remembered how her father's joy seemed to disappear overnight. The man who had once been full of life, humor, and charm now seemed lost. He kept to himself. He stopped going out. When people did see him, he was often alone at the same restaurant, wearing the same clothes, ordering the same meal. His grief showed in his face, and those closest to him said he never truly came back from it. At the time of the crash, Dean Martin had been preparing for something huge, a concert tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. It was called the Ultimate Event. Fans were excited to see the Rat Pack together again, and millions of dollars were at stake. But after losing his son, Martin couldn't go on. He managed to perform a few shows, but his heart wasn't in it. He left the tour early, leaving fans disappointed, and his friendships with Sinatra and Davis strained. After that, Dean Martin stepped away from the public eye. He stopped recording new songs. He stopped appearing in public. Dean Martin's final years were filled with sadness and silence. His ex-wife, John, would often sit at a nearby table in the same restaurant, quietly watching him. It was as if she was watching over a man she no longer knew. Martin, who once charmed the world with his smile and voice, now seemed like a lifeless figure. Keck, who saw them often, said Martin looked like a wax figure barely moving. John's presence wasn't by chance. It felt like she was mourning him while he was still alive. They had shared so much in life, including the terrible loss of their son, Dean Paul, in 1987. Now, their bond was one of shared sorrow. Night after night, Gene's quiet watch showed just how alone Martin had become. Even as his health declined, Martin kept saying he would return to the stage. He told people, "I'll be back on that stage one day. You'll see me." But those close to him knew it wasn't true. The spark that had once lit up his performances was gone. His promise became a sad reminder of what he used to be. Martin could not let go of the idea that he was still a performer, but the world had already moved on. He was left with only memories and dreams that would never come true. Paul Anka, a close friend, revealed the darkest truth. Martin once told him, "I'm just waiting to die, just waiting to die." These words showed the depth of his despair. For a man who had once thrilled millions, it was shocking. He no longer saw a reason to go on. The loss of his son had broken him. His life, both on stage and at home, had fallen apart. Martin, the star known for his charm and humor, was now a man lost in grief, waiting for the end. In September 1993, doctors at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center told Martin he had lung cancer. They urged him to have surgery on his kidneys and liver. The surgery could give him more time, but Martin refused. He had started smoking as a teenager and had lived with cigarettes for decades. When faced with his chance to fight, he chose not to. Friends believed the loss of Dean Paul had left him too heartbroken to keep battling. That year, Martin did quit smoking, but it was too late. His refusal of surgery showed a man ready to accept the end on his own terms. By 1995, Martin rarely left his Beverly Hills home. His health failed fast. Years of smoking had destroyed his lungs. On Christmas Day, December 25, 1995, Martin died from acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema. He was 78. The fact that he died on Christmas made the loss feel even sadder. A day meant for family, and joy became a day of mourning. Frank Sinatra called him a brother, not by blood, but by choice. Martin's death ended an era. Fans across the world felt the loss of a voice and charm that had shaped a generation. Las Vegas paid tribute to the man who helped build its legend. On December 28, 1995, the Strip went dark. The lights of the Sands, Flamingo, Stardust, and other casinos dimmed for 10 minutes. This rare honor was for Martin. The city that he had helped make famous with his wit, music, and style, said its final goodbye. His friends, including Jerry Lewis, Don Rickles, and Shirley Mland, gathered for a private memorial. The darkened Strip reminded all of how much Martin meant to Las Vegas. But the Martin family's heartbreak didn't end there. On August 3, 2016, Martin's youngest son, Raichi, was found dead at 62 in Utah. The cause of death was never shared. Raichi had spent his life celebrating his father's legacy. Just 3 weeks later, John Martin died of cancer at age 89. She had already lived through the loss of Dean Paul, and now Richie. The quick loss of both mother and son closed a sad chapter for family. Even after all the fame and glory, the Martin story ended in deep sorrow with the pain of their losses felt for years to come.